Welcome to the Sliver and Bite podcast. This will mark the very first episode, and we have a bit to get through, so let's get straight into it. This episode, I want to share with you a little more about my past, where I came from, why I cook, and the future of Sliver and Bite. So I was born in Albany, Western Australia, and for the majority of my junior years, I lived in rural and remote Western Australia. So for the first 16 years, I was out in the bush, essentially. I then moved to boarding school in Perth for my final 2 years of high school. Living in the country, I enjoyed it. It certainly didn't feel like I was missing anything, because I'd never known what the city was actually like. And the country, it had this laid-back vibe. You know, there was no sense of urgency. You could actually grow up and just be yourself. Well, not completely myself, because I was living with a secret. Being a closeted homosexual in the 90s was a burden that had to be endured. Coming out in the 90s in rural Australia certainly wasn't an option. In the country, I didn't have any role models. There was no social media. And the few characters that may have been featured on TV, the 4 TV channels that we had in country Western Australia, most of the time, these characters were outcasts. They were depicted as having shame on them for being gay. So I certainly wasn't in a hurry to come out. Nor was there really any expectation for me to come out. Being in the country, there was really no derogatory slurs of being gay. I'm not 100% sure that anyone really knew what it meant to be gay. So for that early part of my life, being blissfully ignorant to the fact that I was gay, that was fine. To put it into perspective, Will and Grace didn't come on the air until 1998. And I had graduated year 10 in 1999. And I had so much more to worry about. I had my family. I was the firstborn of 5. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers, 1 biological mother, 1 stepmother, who's very supportive of Sliver and Bite and me. 4 fathers, 1 that was absent, 1 that was abusive, 1 that was brilliant, still is brilliant, and the other one, not worth mentioning. Family has always been so important to me, and mainly my siblings, as they have ridden this dysfunctional wave with me. Extended family was mainly distant due to the fact that we all lived in the country, but also because they were all such large personalities, and they most often didn't see eye to eye, and they no longer really talk. So that's filtered down to the absence of our cousins. So, taking the family dysfunction into account, I started working quite early. My first job was cleaning the local karate dojo, where I also learned martial arts, and feel this is where I learnt a lot of discipline. I worked at that dojo for 5 years, moving from cleaning to reception, and then over to teaching the Pee-wees, which was a under 5 karate group, to then being a part of the expansion of the karate dojo to a sports and fitness club. And then I started teaching Thai box, which was the karate version of Thai bo. So we mixed aerobics with karate. So that's taken me from the age of 13, where I started cleaning, to 17. And this is where I had to take a few years off because I had moved to boarding school in Perth. I really enjoyed boarding school. I think I loved the fact that I could start on this growth journey of fully discovering myself. All of a sudden, I was in the city. I was on the outskirts of the city, so at least it wasn't in a city and I didn't have that culture shock. But this is where I was able to become myself. I didn't have my siblings and the rigors of, helping mum and dad put the kids to bed and, putting, meals on the table because dad was always working late and mum was working at the hospital in the afternoons and evenings. So I could just be myself and have my own space. I loved it so much that once I graduated, I actually was employed at the boarding school I went to. And I spent 2 years there looking after the boys. And it was an amazing experience because I knew how to treat them. I was one of them and only freshly one of them. So I understood the homesickness, the competition with the other boys. But I fear that I was probably having too much fun. Just waking up, sending the boys to school. On the weekends, we would go out and have field trips at cinemas and at the beach. There was only so much you could grow in that area. So unless I was going to become a teacher, there was really no future working at the boarding school. So I moved out of the boarding school, moved into the city with a friend, and started working at a fuel station. And this was the first taste of corporate life. The regulations, the responsibilities, having strict guidelines as to what you could and couldn't do, the way posters and products were presented, and mystery shoppers. It was a whole other world and a whole other way of thinking. I worked at 3 different sites over 3 different years. I worked my way up to a supervisory level, but quickly realised that working at a gas station certainly wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So as a side hustle, I started my own little business. It was called Encompass Productions. I started it because I enjoy graphic design and HTML, so I started designing websites. I then added invitation creation and company flyers. It lasted a few years. It wasn't very lucrative, but it allowed me to have this little side hustle, earn a little bit of extra money on the side while I was working at the gas stations. Then I was offered a position at a retail store. My uncle, who had married into the family, he had 4 franchised Australian Football League stores. So I was selling clothing, gifts, memorabilia. And when the West Australian team won a premiership, the business expanded. And with that came growth into a warehouse, an online store, which I had managed. I managed the inventory in both the website and the warehouse. Looking back on it now, I would have done things so much differently. I would have taken advantage of the amazing opportunities that I was afforded. But being 26 years old, it felt like a dead-end job, and I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to get out of there so bad, I was willing to go international. So I became an au pair. I moved to the USA for 3 years. 3 amazing years that taught me so many lessons. All of a sudden, I was back in childcare, looking after 2 teenage boys, 10 and 13 years of age when I arrived. A handful, for sure. But the opportunity to be in America and learn and understand more about the world and how large it was. To figure out for myself the misconception of Americans, their politics, and their way of life. I was very fortunate to be living with an affluent family in an affluent area with an amazing family support network. Not that there wasn't challenges, but I certainly had it so much better than other au pairs. There is a whole lot more on me being an au pair, and I do have a book that's written. It's not published, but stay tuned. However, all good things must come to an end. Again, my visa had run out, so it was back to Australia. And I certainly did want to get back out into the world. And a surefire way to do that, in my mind, was hospitality. I wanted to get into the hotel system. But you needed experience. I needed experience just to wash dishes at the Hyatt. It was so exhausting applying day after day to just about every hotel in Perth, and I got nowhere. The dream was to live in Manhattan and be the GM of the Lapaka Meridian, such a chic hotel overlooking Central Park with all the bells and whistles. Well, I'd better get some experience then. So I enrolled in an introductory food and beverage course, which led me to apply for university. I got accepted to do a bachelor degree in international resort and hotel management. And my rooms division lecturer, who worked at a hotel, got me an interview, which I was successful for. And I worked for this hospitality group for 10 years before having that inevitable mental breakdown. It's amazing how one or two little things can be that straw that broke the camel's back. I developed severe anxiety and depression. But having worked there for 10 years, I was fortunate to have 600 plus hours of sick leave up my sleeve. So I was able to take time, focus on what was important, understand that I wasn't alone in these feelings. I remember seeing an interview with Cher, and she had said that all of the troubles that she had been through and the depression that she had suffered, her advice was to lean into it, push through it, and when you get through to the other side, you will be so much stronger. And it is so true. But yet again, another learning curve. Gained more knowledge about people, about the HR department within a big corporation. And that has led me to have no desire to work for big business anymore. Well, certainly not directly anyway. I value my mental health above all else now. I don't do anything that I know will set me back. I don't place myself in situations I either know or could potentially put my mental health at risk. Don't get me wrong, I still take risks, but they're more calculated. There are two sayings that I live by. Number one, you can never make the same mistake twice, because the second time you make it, it's not a mistake, it's a choice. And number two, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I apply both of those sayings to my business and my personal life. Now that my GP, psychologist, and my psychiatrist were happy for me to wind down the sessions and slowly fizzle them out because I was of sound mind and had built up my toolbox, as they would say, to be able to cope with the world again. So where to next? I certainly wasn't going back to hospitality. I had already vowed I wasn't working for big business again. So as I was recovering, I had started baking. It was the perfect distraction. There's no way you can be in your head and thinking about the past and rehashing the arguments and rehashing what was said and how it was said and how it made you feel when you were trying to convert cups to the metric system, or how much longer you had on the bake, and developing a Swiss buttercream that was perfect for the Perth heat. So I continued down that path. I found some digital mentors over social media. I watched them. I learnt from them. My aim was to make the perfect cupcake with the most luxurious frosting, but it had to be from scratch. It was easier said than done. Do you know how many ways there are to prepare frosting? However, I quickly learned that I did have a knack for it. And in the early stages, what I was preparing wasn't half bad. The family seemed to love it. And there was one day, I had a friend that had said, I'd pay for that. And that got my entrepreneurial juices churning. And it didn't take too long for the note that I stuck on the fridge had to be put into a calendar. And then it had to go from the calendar into some type of a planner. And then it went from the planner into an e-commerce website that was able to book and manage the payments for me. Then came the expansion of the dessert range. So no longer was it just cakes and cupcakes. It was corporate and decorative cookies, cheesecakes, mousse, lamingtons, choc-dipped strawberries. Then I had interest from wholesalers wanting muffins and slices. All the while, this was being operated out of my apartment. Business was booming, and I was able to support myself off of the creations that I was putting together for these people. Could it really be that easy? Wake up and enjoy what you do whilst working for yourself? Well, there was always one concern, and it weighed on me. I struggled to register the kitchen I was working in, and I was just working out of my apartment. I applied twice for the suburb that I was living in at the time and knocked back twice. It was frustrating because there were other suburbs, neighbouring suburbs, that were registered and they were cooking in the same conditions I was. So there was the Food and Safety Act. However, it could be implemented in different ways in different suburbs. So I just kept on cooking. Until that day, that fateful day, that I had the knock on the door. It was the health department and the police. They were there to shut me down. There was no serious misconduct, but it was based on more of the technicality and the fit out of where I was cooking. I didn't have a separate basin to wash my hands. I only had the kitchen sink. I never felt like I was misleading my clients either. My website clearly stated that I was cooking in an unregistered kitchen, and my corporate clients were all aware of the fact I wasn't registered. So after being slapped with a $4,000 fine, I had to find a way to earn money. What was I going to do next? And that led me to applying to be a delivery partner. And to this day, I still enjoy the simplicity of collecting a package and delivering it to its destination. Yes, I'm aware I'm working for big business. However, as a contractor, I choose my own hours. I choose where I work and where I deliver. And everything happens for a reason, right? I'd picked up from a particular outlet a few times, and I'd gotten close to the owner. And of course, I was passionate about my past and Sliver and Bite and what I had done, and she had offered me a space in her kitchen. Come and create here. Become a merchant. Have somebody come here to pick up what you create and deliver to a client. Are you kidding me? Who does that? That was an opportunity I would have been crazy to pass up. I did communicate to her that, and these were my words, I said I didn't want to have my heart broken because obviously being shut down, I was very cautious about moving forward. And if it didn't have the staying power, I wasn't prepared to put my heart and soul into it again. Because if you haven't picked up on that, I'm an all or nothing guy, and I'm a heart on my sleeve, and I'm both feet first. So I set everything up. I had 2 delivery platforms that were collecting from me, and it was an epic 3 months, but that's all it lasted. Unfortunately, it just didn't work. The logistics of me only being able to cook there after they finished, because as large a kitchen as it is, it wasn't large enough to have me there during the day. So I had to wait until they had cleaned down, and then I could come through for the evening. And there just wasn't enough time to prepare. And then I found myself staying until 10, 11 o'clock at night, only to have to wake up the next day to do the delivery partner work, and then go back into the kitchen to open my own store. It was exhausting, financially and physically. You may be thinking, if you love cooking so much, why don't you go into a kitchen? You know, it can be a small business. I just can't see myself working for somebody, having to live by their rules and do their recipes. It's just not something that I was prepared to do, and I don't have the experience to be a head chef. And nor do I want to start at the bottom to work my way up again. And the hospo hours, they're not for me. Now let's backtrack just a little bit. When I was at the height of my success, baking from home, you know, in the unregistered kitchen, I had started a YouTube channel, and I called it Sliver and Bite TV. Back then, I was being approached by businesses to do some demonstrations with their products. I wanted to have a more formal setting to display this content. I created 3 videos, and due to being shut down, I didn't post any more. Until 3 months ago, my housemates saw me struggling to capture some content of some pizza dough that I had made. I was just filming it for a sibling, I think. He gave me this phone holder that had this arm, and I was able to put it directly over the pizza that I was preparing. And looking back at the footage, it didn't look half bad. So I slapped my brand on it, and I posted it on YouTube, only to get 4.4 thousand views, 33 likes, and 1 subscriber. What? Okay. You know, here's where the entrepreneurial juices start flowing again. But I had to ensure that there was something a little bit different with my channel. There are plenty of channels out there that cook food, film it, and post it. I remembered back to when I was learning how to bake. So many of the films that were posted, they were all so quick. And I understand why. They wanted to get the gist of what they were doing in a 30-second to 1 minute clip. But when I was learning, I had to keep on rewinding it just to get back to where they were cracking the eggs, because while I was cracking the eggs, they were already folding in the flour. So I figured, let's create some long form videos that show me cooking real time. Well, as close to cooking real time. I didn't need to have the camera pointed at the oven for 30 minutes while something was cooking. So cut to me. In 3 months, I have created 82 videos. 32 of those 82 are long form tutorials. The rest are YouTube shorts. I have had 22,000 views, 571 likes, 45 comments, 99 shares, and 60 subscribers in the last 3 months. I simply like the fact that I'm heading up. I'm increasing. I'm certainly not going backwards. As for the future of Sliver and Bite, well, I'm heading into my 3rd transition, and I'm positive it's headed in the right direction. Up. I have already set up my affiliate marketing through Amazon. I have my first commission-based advert registered, and I'm still so excited to wake up and cook each and every day. I won't lie, it's difficult to be creating this channel while I'm out on the road, but with every encounter and interaction with big or small business, I'm gaining knowledge through their behaviors and my interactions with clients. I'm gaining this unfair advantage of knowing and understanding what the customers are looking for. And that's what's led me to creating this business podcast. I look forward to sharing my experiences and my observations with you. Knowledge is gained in the most unlikeliest of places, and I often find myself surrounded with opportunity. So if you like what you hear and you're intrigued by my journey so far, subscribe. Follow along the rest of Sliver and Bite's journey. Who knows where it's going to take us? Thank you for listening to my very first episode of the Sliver and Bite podcast. I look forward to bringing you more. We'll see you soon.